Amazing, and we are live. My name is Marco. Thank you for everyone for joining. I'm here with the incredible Keith Jones, and yeah, we're going to just be talking about unpacking Africa and the startup world and leadership. I started this Gen Z show to interview some of the leaders globally and just have a conversation around the future of technology and where we see the world going in the next kind of 5 to 10 years. So I'm super excited to be here with you today. We're going to be exploring a few different topics, but if you do have any questions, please actually comment them now in the chat, just so that we can set that time for you. And as the conversation goes, please feel free to ask a question because we do want to engage with you. So Keith, why don't you just give the audience a quick little background on who you are and Sw7 and what you're currently working on.
Marco, thanks for having us. Great to be here. We say we're Africa's leading tech accelerator for B2B tech businesses. We're a go-to-market accelerator for tech businesses. I'm a rehabilitated techie, so I did quite a few years techie coding internationally, banks and financial institutions. Started my own business here, ran it for 10 years, listed in London in 2009, did 2 fundraisers in the UK, did 6 acquisitions, and then started doing board advisory and mentoring businesses in about 2011, and realized that there's a huge gap in the market and there's no real support. And that was the whole time the startup ecosystem was lifting. So we got into acceleration through that process, launched the first tech accelerator in Africa in 2013. So now, and we're 7, 8, 9 years in.
And like almost 300 businesses, right? You guys have personally mentored and worked with.
We've worked with 300 businesses. We worked with all the banks. We work with Microsoft. We work with Amazon. We worked with a lot of the big guys. We work with Sw7 in a tribe. So it's 500 startups. We work with a lot of the international guys. We did the Standard Bank. We ran the innovation sort of tracks for 2 years. We worked with the RMI Alpha Code. We ran the first fintech accelerator in Africa with them. Over the years, we worked with about 300 tech businesses. But the whole time we've been doing this, we've been building a platform, because the first thing we realized is international accelerators don't really work in Africa. The international sort of acceleration structures are designed, they're based on an equity liquidity model. And what that means is the accelerator is designed for you to come on to take equity, and the assumption is the equity they can either fundraise or liquidate the equity at some point in the future. Now, in Africa, we're quite unfunded. So the equity funding model doesn't really work in Africa. So we launched very quickly after launching a international accelerator. We launched Sw7. We actually made a decision halfway through our first cohort that it wasn't going to work locally. We realized that it's a small market. It's just the funding. The whole focus is on funding. And you're not going to get funded. 1% of businesses in Africa in any market get funded. So there's a 99% chance you're going to bootstrap. So if we're going to bootstrap, let's try and help the businesses to bootstrap.
Yeah, 100%. And now, having gone through that process with so many companies, what are some of the fundamental lessons from a startup point of view that you've kind of seen, like, for example, bootstrapping versus raising and, accelerating and hiring the right people? What are some of the fundamental things you've seen? Just some principles for startups to think about.
Where to start? The learnings. We've been on the journey for a long time. I suppose there's so many points, but we're a go-to-market accelerator, and the reason we're a go-to-market accelerator is about 4 or 5 years ago, we were working with a lot of the corporates. They were sponsoring us, and we realized through the process that it's really difficult, if I'm sponsored, for me to give value to the people in the room, because I've got a corporate sponsor who's looking for a particular agenda to be met, and that agenda doesn't usually specifically mean lifting the businesses in the room. So we made a decision about 4 or 5 years ago to focus on the startup, and we started working closely with, as I said, we work with 300 businesses. The range typically is obviously early stage through to probably our biggest customers, about 180 million rand turnover. And then you start to unpack the things that they need. And there's 3 or 4 main tracks we work with right now. So I posted a meme from Andrew Gadzeki, which is, if you're a startup founder, understand that you're going to have to learn sales and marketing.
Yeah.
In Africa, we have a massively fragmented dispersed economy, unstructured economy. So access, so distribution is so our biggest problem in Africa is in emerging markets anywhere in the world is distribution. Is how do you create a distribution model? So the tech, yes, the tech's important, but how are you going to get it to market? So if you start focusing, so from the day you write the first line of code, you need to understand who the customer is. You need to get really close to them, and you need to understand how you're going to reach them and how you're going to sell to them. So I'd say 90% of our work with businesses is getting them to focus, is narrowing the focus down, is focusing on a smaller market sector, bring the energy and focus to sales a whole lot sooner. But customer intimacy is you cannot be too close to your customer. So if you think you're close to the customer, get closer, get to really understand the pain points that you're solving for your customer, and your business will grow faster.
And then from an opposite spectrum, I mean, if there's an investor or someone who's just about to launch a startup or has a startup, what are some of the opportunities that being in Africa holds? Like, what are some of why would someone want to stay here? Why would you suggest someone invest in Africa? What are some of the potential competitive advantage from being here versus in the States or London, etc.?
So we've got two economies, and South Africa is quite different. So if you look at the South African economy, I don't know what the stats are now, but a while ago you had 385 businesses in South Africa account for 85% of the GDP. So the first thing is South African economy is unique in that our B2B market is world class. So our B2B businesses in South Africa tend to start here and go offshore. If you're looking for funding, you need to be offshore. If you're going to sell your business in South Africa, you're going to be offered probably a three times multiple on recurring revenue. If you take the same business into Europe, you're going to be offered a 5 times multiple on recurring revenue. You take the same business to America, and you'll be offered 7 times recurring revenue. So if you are funded, you need to move your IP offshore. So we spend a lot of time working with businesses on helping set up international structures to move the IP offshore, to access funding, to access the global market. In South Africa, the opportunities are, most of our businesses here, a lot of our businesses are serving the unserved. Now, if you look at the West, everything they're trying to do in the developed world is that they're trying to improve an existing process. They're taking an existing digital economy and they're making it better and faster. And they're growing the economy. Our digital inclusion, financial inclusion opportunity here is most of our businesses here serve the unserved. So we're serving greenfields economies. You look at the youth, look at the growth, look at the size of the continent, 54 countries, 1.4 billion people. It's an enormous market, and it's quite unserved. So we've only just started the whole cloud revolution is only just lifting off now. And then cloud combined with mobile, telecoms is improving, connectivity is going up, smartphones are going. So it's growing quickly. So we're a greenfields opportunity, but I would say that the biggest opportunity is for local people to serve local businesses. That's really the biggest opportunity.
Brilliant. And then from a leadership point of view, these medium-sized organizations and even up to the large ones, like you mentioned, one of your clients that's doing 180 million AR, what do you see from a leadership point of view, from a CEO's? I mean, running a small business to then 10 or 15 years later to having hundreds of employees, that's a huge difference. And that person has to, go through certain growth and training and development. What are you seeing your successful CEOs? What leadership traits and characteristics do they have?
So product businesses are very different to normal businesses. If you're a product, so we work with product-led tech businesses. And what we talk about with product-led businesses is ego death. Is no matter how smart you think you are, no matter how much you think you know, when you face the customer, none of that matters, because if the customer doesn't click next and use your product and say, this is great, click, I want, and they go through the process to use the product, it doesn't matter how clever you are. So different businesses can grow in different ways, but product-led businesses, which are the ones that have high scale, nonlinear growth, which is what all the ones that the VCs seek. There's ego death comes from obviously getting punched in the face by the market repeatedly, which happens with product businesses. But then when that happens, you start to listen to the customer more and more, and you start to listen to the problems and get really close to what the customer's what they're trying to solve for, and then you help them solve for that. So the leadership traits, we do a lot of OKRs and structuring. So we take a lot of businesses through the organizational changes they grow. So as they come through the first kind of growth phase to kind of 13 heads, and then your next ceiling is about 30 heads, and the next ceiling is 50 heads. And as you go through each ceiling, you've got to create an accountability structure inside your business, and you've got to put OKRs and performance metrics in place, and goals, and help guide the business through what they're trying to do. So leadership traits, humility will get beaten into you whether you want it or not. So humility is a great trait to start off with, because it's going to come whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about the servant leader. It's listening to customers cannot be overstated. And then sales. If you're a founder, you're going to have to get good at sales.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of, like, for those listening perhaps that lead teams of 20, 30, 40 people, or they're founders themselves and now they're scaling, are there any questions that you would suggest that they start asking from a business model point of view and a structure point of view as they now grow?
Yeah, so it's on the, if you look at the willingness to pay of the customer, I mean, every time you ask me a question, I'm going to respond with, it's the customer's point of view. So that's everything we do, is we flip everything around for the business to their point of view. So it comes back to, if you put up 10 features of a product, the customer is typically only willing to pay for 20% of them. And the 20% of features the customer is willing to pay for are not the ones you think they are. They're not the ones that deliver the most value usually. So when you're talking to the customer, any business model you do, any business you test, is the acid test is the customer willing to pay for this? So I mean, anyone can build cool tech, you can add features, you can do all sorts of stuff, and you can extend your product. But if the customer's not willing to pay for it, then it's got no value. So I would say that if you get close to the customer, you've really got to double down on what is the customer prepared to pay for? Because if they have a pain and you're going to remove the pain for them, they'll pay for that. And that's the core of your business, is whatever they see as the problem, and then how they see you removing the problem is going to trigger the willingness to pay. So if you can build your business model on the features that the customer is willing to pay for, it's going to scale faster.
And then maybe let's quickly just go into venture capital for a second, just because it's such a big thing. And all over LinkedIn, we see companies raising and announcements and new funds and all this. So I want to just ask a question in terms of your perspective. Where do you see the venture capital market and model and growth within Africa within the next 5 to 10 years going? What are you maybe looking at or frustrated about, or where do the opportunities lie within that space?
So funding, it's as I said, I did a post. Funding it's rocket fuel. So make sure you've got a rocket. So everyone chases funding because it solves their problem, but it doesn't necessarily solve the VC's problem. So the VC you raise a fund. If I raise a $10 million fund, the only reason I raise the fund is I promised the people who give me the money, I promised them a 3x return. So they've given me $10 million and I promised them $30 million back. That's the deal. So it's a 3x return. So if you look at Africa, 1% of businesses are funded. So if we take 1,000 businesses, 10 are funded. Of the 10, 7 will fail, and we will have 2 that do okay, and one that will grow really nicely. So yes, look at funding. If you want to enter America, $1 million is not enough. You need at least $2 million to enter America. So if you have international expansion plans, so biggest frustration for me is the amount of headspace that funding takes up. So we've got a limited attention span on digital channels and a limited capacity for entrepreneurs in Africa. Funding takes up about 50% of that headspace. Now, statistically, 99.7% of businesses shouldn't fundraise. And those are the stats that any funder will agree with you and say, well, those are the true numbers of funding. So if you've got 99.7% of businesses that shouldn't fundraise, we should have, let's talk about bootstrapping. Let's talk about lifting the markets. Let's talk about like what reality is about. So the frustration I have is that funding is useful in certain situations. It's great and it's fantastic in certain situations. In most situations, it doesn't apply. And then also, our markets are illiquid. And what that means is if I take a minority equity position in a small business, I can't liquidate my position. So the equity model and the traditional VC model that comes out of America is not going to work for us. That model is broken, it's defunct. I don't know if you know the stats. I think 85% of funds don't return the promised return in America. So I think 85% of funds are not making that. They promise a 300% return, and 85% of them don't make the return. So so that model's it's valid for liquid economies. It's not valid for illiquid economies. So if you want to go the funding route, accept the fact you need to place yourself in a liquid market, somewhere like America or the UK. And if you want funding to work in our economy, we need to come up with a different liquidity model, a different way of funding the business that's not based on, I'm going to invest in 10 and 7 fail. What we need in Africa is I'm going to invest in 10 and 10 succeed. That's really the model that we need, because we can't afford the failures. We don't have the luxury of manufacturing failures that doesn't help the job market.
And in terms of first-time founders, do you believe, like, what is the greatest way? I mean, if we're looking from a failure rate, I see a lot of entrepreneurs that I've engaged with from my business, and it's like I kind of question whether they're ready. Do you think that? I mean, in America, there's this culture of everyone should start a business and everyone should be an entrepreneur, and like, you know, there's such a big entrepreneurial culture, and especially in Silicon Valley and that. Would you agree with that, or would you say people actually need to take a step back and, if you're a first-time founder, spend some time in a startup ecosystem, spend some time building relationships and finding value and finding real solutions? Do you think that would propel our ecosystem, or do you think them working it out and failing and then reinventing themselves is a better way of doing it?
Well, so the first thing is startup. You say spend some time in the startup ecosystem. There's no such thing as a startup ecosystem. We're in a business economy, and you've got people launching businesses and you've got people not launching businesses. So if I'm trying to launch a business, I'm trying to lift my income statement. I mean, it's a simple business dynamic. I'm trying to create a business. It's a commercial market. So the ecosystem as a concept doesn't exist.
What I meant was working for other startups. Sorry.
Working for other startups. Yeah. I mean, it's if you start serving customers and selling services to build products. So start with software with a service, or start serving customers and building a business. Get in the market, start serving customers. What you learn about business in 2 years of running your own business will take you 10 years to learn in someone else's. Okay. So and in Africa, we like it's a lot of America is about hype. And what consumes the media content. When you say it's all over America, they should launch businesses. Most Americans aren't launching businesses. The success rate in America of businesses hasn't changed in 10 years. So we don't have this bubble of more successes actually happening in America. But what we do have is a sort of cult of celebrity of funding that's attracting a lot of media attention. And the reason it's attracting attention is because all of the partners in the ecosystem want to see money flowing to the sector, because that excites them. Doesn't necessarily help the sector, but it excites the larger players. So if you're launching a small business, launch a small business. Go and serve customers. Learn, roll up your sleeves, get stuck in, and get into the business economy. And yeah, the best way to learn is to do it. You learn more doing stuff on your own than you would ever learn in any other environment.
Yeah, and then lastly, because this show is around Gen Z and my work's around Gen Z, what stands out to you about this generation?
So the Gen Zs they're digital natives and they're digital first. So the Gen Zs they're kind of built for this economy, if you know what I mean. We're all going online. And one thing I would say is that there's our African Gen. So in Africa, digital is digital to bricks and mortar. That's how you make money. In the West, it's digital to digital. So Gen Zs are digital natives. The flip side is what we talk about permission to sell. Is much of the budget is still controlled by the older generation. So much of the business budget is in the hands of the older generation. And the Gen Zs are impatient. But we are, as we stand today, this is the biggest shift of wealth in the history of the planet. We're actually seeing more wealth transferred to younger generation starting now over the next 20, 30 years than has ever happened in the history of the planet. So what's going to happen is, as that wealth transfers to younger generation, their buying habits are going to change, and Gen Zs are absolutely positioned to work with that generation of the wealth, because that's where the money is going to be going forward, and they're positioned for that. Current market we're in, I don't know what the stats are. I think it's 85% of business spend is controlled by over 50-year-olds. It's kind of something like that. So it is, unfortunately, the purse strings remain in the hand of the older generation.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we got one question. If you do have a question, please put in the chat now quickly. But I'm going to go to Natalie. Thank you for joining, Natalie. She says, how do you get your customer insights, real deep insights?
So there's two levels of customer insights. There's the customer attributes, which you can get quite easily. So the attributes are the things that describe the customer, which is, it's the old school metrics of marketing. What triggers a buying behavior now is the customer behaviors. What's changed in their world? Are they ready to buy? What we look for in the customer, we look for something called the compelling event. What's changed in the customer's world to make them buy now? So we seek a compelling event to say, you didn't want a solution last month, but you want one this month. Why do you want one now? And we seek that data point. The other thing we look for is the appetite to engage, which is based on what we call the coping mechanism. And what that is if you don't have the solution in place, how do you cope? What's your workaround? And what that coping mechanism is, it indicates if they're really serious about trying to solve the problem. Because if I don't have a really good coping mechanism, I'm not that invested in fixing the problem. So the behaviors of customers, when you say behavioral customer insights today are behavioral, not attribute based, but we still have to use attributes to try and sort of screen customers at a high level. But customers are going to engage based on their capacity and their appetite, which is behavioral. It's not attribute based.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to give people a chance to pop a question quickly while I ask you one more. So if you do have a question, it's the last chance, please ask it now. In terms of, you've obviously been in the game for quite a while now. You've obviously had the opportunity to go overseas. Why have you decided to still stay in Africa, and why are you continually, building and investing and spending time in the African ecosystem? What do you see, or why do you believe in this space?
A constant conversation at home. So my co-founder is Odette is my wife and my co-founder. So we run the business together. Odette was 18 years in London. I was 13 years overseas. Odette came down here in 2007. I was 13 years overseas. Bought a boat, sailed back here, started a business, and constant conversation at home. I'm sure as every South African household at the moment is, should we go? And you look out the window and you've got a nice lifestyle. It's a great place to be. The opportunities here. We are here out of choice, and it's a conscious choice to be here. Other places don't have. They have problems too, and this is still a nice place to live. There's such good energy. The lifestyle's good. There's great energy here. Obviously, Eskom has knocked most of the country for a six, to be quite honest. Most of the people weren't prepared for Eskom coming. I'm from Zim, so I've been through the cycle and watched the slow motion train wreck before. We're here out of choice. We're here because we enjoy the people we work with. We enjoy the energy, and we enjoy the opportunity.
Brilliant. Well, where can people reach you, Keith?
Website sw7.co. So if anybody wants to get in touch, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. So ping me on LinkedIn if you want to have a chat. I do respond on LinkedIn. It may take a couple of days, but I will respond. So anybody who wants to find me, ping me on LinkedIn, connect with Odette. on LinkedIn as well. We do sort of complimentary assessments, gal readiness assessments for businesses. So if you've got your own tech business with a product, we'll do a complimentary workshop to scorecard your business and go through gal readiness. So that's on our website as well. You can click on the link and join up there, and we'll do a workshop with you. LinkedIn and the website really are probably the best options.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you, Keith, for joining. This is Gen Z 360. My name is Marco Stavro. And yeah, thank you for everyone for being in, Keith. Yeah, your insights are really, really helpful. And I always love showing people who believe in Africa. I think that there's a lot of attitude and conversations around, obviously, opportunity cost of living and the downside of being in South Africa. But I think it's so encouraging to both founders and people working in organizations trying to build Africa when we can speak to someone like yourself and see actually how far we've come and how the growth. So yeah, thank you so much for your time and all your work.
Yeah, pleasure. I mean, I did it. Sorry, just a quick. I did the motorbike trip, Cape to Cairo motorbike trip a few years ago. And I rode, from Cape Town up to Cairo on my motorbike, and that it leaves you with it's a really uplifting experience. I mean, once you do that kind of trip, it's really it's fantastic. It's just you realize what a massive and great warm continent it is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, thanks, Keith.
Good. Thanks, Marco. Cheers.